And welcome to this fabulous building, this fabulous view. Shame about the weather. I'm Sam Baker, co-founder and CEO of The Pool. We've just turned 2. And there's a cake, but I've threatened them with death if they bring it up here. And I have to say this, we won a Webby for the best mobile lifestyle site and app. So can we have another clap, please? So what better way to celebrate than to bring together some of the UK's most inspiring women who have really left their mark on the world. Before I introduce you to this awe-inspiring and a bit scary panel, especially Mel, she's really scary. I've got some thank yous to say. So firstly, thank you to our host for this evening, Estee Lauder Companies, the brainchild of a woman actually who truly left her mark on our faces and our wallets, especially mine. Particular thanks to the Clinique team and Amy LaRue, who agreed to be our partners when The Pool was no more than a sheet of A4, very long time ago. Chris Good for his continued support of The Pool, and Leslie Crowther, Anna Bartle and Anna Hoff, and I've got in brackets, need to check her name, for helping us organise tonight. And of course, thank you to M&S for the champagne. Now to our panel. Yes, we've already partaken. Now, these women are what we call game changers. They reject the status quo, they speak out, and they work hard to make things better for others. Firstly, we have Labour MP and women's champion Harriet Harman. Harriet is Britain's longest-serving female MP after 34 years, 8 of which she spent as deputy leader of the Labour Party. Harriet has spent a large part of her career pioneering policies to improve women's lives, and her memoir, A Woman's Work, was released earlier this year. Businesswoman and transparency campaigner Gina Miller. Gina came to national attention when she became the figurehead in a legal challenge to get Parliament to vote on whether the UK could start the process for Brexit. She has now launched Best for Britain, a cross-party campaign to support MPs who are campaigning against a hard Brexit. But before this, Miller worked in the business sector and launched True and Fair, a campaign for transparency in the financial industry. Good luck with that. Is it easier than politics?
Better than it was before.
We'll talk about that. Melanie Eusebe, Chief Executive of WOW Festival and Chair of the British Black Business Awards. With over 18 years' experience in business, Melanie has worked as a consultant with brands such as EY and IBM. In 2002, she launched the Black British Business Awards. She sits on multiple boards and has a master's in philosophy. Melanie is also Chief Executive of the Women on the World Festival, a global movement that celebrates the achievements of women and girls, as well as examining the discrimination they still face. And last, but very much not least, ethical fashion pioneer and fashion revolution founder, Carrie Summers. Having created the world's first clothing brand to be recognised as fair trade, Summers then launched Fashion Revolution in response to the 2013 Rana Plaza disaster. The now global movement in over 60 countries works to radically change the way clothes are sourced, produced and consumed. So I'm going to start, Harriet, with you. When did you first realise you wanted to bring about change?
Well, I was brought up at a time when the most inspiring ambition for a girl, a young woman, was to get a good husband, defined by, how well off he was. And it was a very kind of conflicted time because, we were supposed to get a bit of an education, but not too much of an education because nobody would want a girl who was too clever by half. And I just felt, me and my 3 sisters, and a whole load of other women of our generation thought, no, this is absolutely not the way we expect to lead our lives, have as the pinnacle of our aspiration, grabbing a good husband and then sort of providing support services by way of housewifery and looking after taking sole responsibility of the children and giving up your work or massively scaling it down. We just felt there was a great unfairness on that, and that's really kind of the women's movement, the amazing women's movement in the 1960s and the 1970s, where all the things we were told we couldn't, shouldn't do, would never be able to, we thought, well, we are going to, and we just thought it was unfair and thought, well, we'd have to just work together to change the world. So it was a big kind of mass movement, really.
And and from that into politics, was politics the obvious route to affect change for you at that point?
Well, I think, there were so many women trying to get on in business, in academia, in the professions. But we also, Parliament was 97% men and only 3% women. And that was deciding all the laws, that's who all the government ministers were. So we were like, well, we can't leave that like that. That is unfair. How can it be representative of this country where it's 50% women, where it's 97% men? And the idea that men did all the decision making and all the talking and we just like nodded and agreed with it. No, we thought, well, we'll have to go in ourselves and we'll have to try and get into Parliament. So that's what, a number of us did. It took quite a long time to go from 3% to where we are now, but we're now a critical mass. And, women's voices and women in the House of Commons is not such a rare thing. We're still outnumbered by the men. We've never got to forget that. But actually, politics is so important in terms of public policy, in terms of all the decisions that are made about public services, the framework for business, and people's lives. I mean, one of the things that they had in those days is like, I looked when I was first an MP, the Maternity Services Advisory Committee was all men. This is the Department of Health.
Like
and I said, why is it all men? Why can't we have any women on the Maternity Services Advisory Committee, which was regarded as a ridiculous question by somebody who didn't understand about politics. And the women's movement just challenged all of that.
Gina, your background's finance. When did you first realise you wanted to be a change maker?
I can't actually remember never wanting to be. I was always that really disruptive little girl who asked all the awkward questions and did all the awkward things. But it's interesting about upbringing, because part of it for me is nature, but also nurture. But the nature's part of it is that I had parents. I had 3 brothers, a sister much later. And my parents told me there was nothing that I couldn't do that my brothers couldn't do. So I never thought there were any barriers to me. It was never a question. What they did tell me was that you had to be responsible for your actions, that whatever you have and you take for granted might be gone tomorrow. So therefore you have to take responsibility, and you have to care about other people. Other people matter. And their words have echoed in every part of my life ever since. So I think from my point of view of women, one of the things I've really tried and stress to women is, please stop saying, I'm only a mother. If I ever meet a mother who says that, a woman who says that, I said, no, you don't understand. You have the power to influence the values and the shape of the next generation's lives. You probably have the most responsible job there is, because my mother and my parents echo my life. So that I've always been this disruptive person. But when it comes to being a change maker, I think I've always stayed true to my voice. I've always thought, can I go to bed at night and think, I did the right thing today? I've kept it very simple. I think Harriet and her generation did the hard work, and we have the responsibility to repay them for the work they did. And I'm worried about the fact that activism around the world, women's activism, is taking on a voice, but in Western cultures in the UK, we're sort of not living up to the people who've led the way for us, and that too many women are not stepping up. And I just want to lead by example and say, you need to exercise the 3 things you own. One is your voice, one is your conscience, and the other is your actions. You just have to get out there and do it. And I can't remember not being that person.
Mel, nature, nurture, or did you suddenly become disruptive at 18? I think you might have always been disruptive too.
I was always disruptive. But my mother, she's very tall. I'm actually the shortest in my family. And she said, people are going to notice you, so you might as well make sure that they notice you for something good. And I was bullied a lot when I was a child. I went to an all-white school, and I remember the kids used to make fun of the size of my lips, or they used to make fun of just being pretty much a black girl with woolly hair because you don't really know how to fix your afro. It hasn't changed very much. But it's, you were always an outsider. And I think that, if I kind of look at it philosophically, then I would say it's about resilience. And so I grew resilience. And I remember that my 12, when I was in kind of grade 12-ish, so that would be, I was 12 years old in grade 7, and my teacher told me that, they're going to make fun of you. They're making fun of you now, Melly, but when I cannot wait to see you when you are an adult. Because you are going to change things. You're going to change the world. Just that one teacher that told me I was going to change, not just my world, but the world. And it was great because she left a message on my Facebook a few days ago. And she said she was so proud of me, but she was the one that comforted me. And so she was one that identified that I was going to be someone who fought for the rights of others and who I hated being excluded myself. And so every day, everything that I do is about a feeling of inclusion. So just making sure that everyone feels welcome to whatever conversation, that you're welcome to have the opportunity, you're welcome to have the equal pay and the money, you're welcome to have the experiences that everyone else is having. So I think it was unfortunately framed by bullying. You'll find that the founder of WOW, Jude Kelly, if you look at our whole team as well, we've all gone through some really serious experiences in some way or another. And that has built resilience, and that has built that spirit of inclusion, unfortunately. With darkness comes the light, So it's a sad thing, but it's also an absolutely amazing thing, because we know that out of the hurt and pain of the past, you can turn it into something really positive. So that's when I knew I was a change maker, when I was crying in the bathroom and with my big hair and my braces and my lanky limbs that I couldn't control.
Carrie, how important to you is that notion of equality in driving what you've done with the fashion industry?
I think it's always been there for me, and I think very much like we've heard from the other panelists and from Gina, it's something I've grown up with. I've grown up with that sense of injustice at inequality, and that's what really sort of landed me in the fashion industry. I always feel like my career path has not been anything that I haven't sort of consciously sort of moved in any particular direction, but it always seems to have something's drawn me that way. So I was doing a master's in Native American studies, and I had a fully funded PhD ahead of me, which is something you never hear of these days. And I saw the producers going to buy wool in Ecuador when I was doing my research, and saw just that symbol of justice in front of me, the weighing scales, and saw the producers being charged a price which bore no resemblance to the cost per kilo. They only had rudimentary knowledge of Spanish because they were Quechua speakers. And they were being ripped off when they bought the wool and ripped off when they sold the jumpers at the end. And so after I finished my master's, I thought, well, I've got the summer holidays ahead of me. And just that sort of naivety and that anger against the injustice, I thought, well, I'm going to set up a business and help these people. Got together enough money, a loan from my parents to buy the raw materials in bulk, and started designing knitwear, which sold really well. So I gave up my PhD, then had death threats, I had robberies, it was quite a dangerous time in Ecuador, but I think it's that real sort of spirit of perseverance and that belief in what you're doing which drives you forwards.
Those threats, kind of slightly leaping on in my questions, those threats, were they connected to you being a woman, or were they just connected to you stirring the shit, for want of a better way of putting it?
Yep, completely stirring the shit. I mean, the wool industry was controlled by the middlemen, and they'd already carried out arson attacks against some of the producers who had tried to organise themselves into women's associations, into cooperatives, who were sort of proving a threat to the power of the middlemen. So it was me sort of getting in there and stirring the shit and trying to give the cooperatives, who really had no other outlet, some form of a market in Europe.
And you weren't tempted at any point to cave?
No, there were some pretty grim moments when I had to live in a van for a year to try to pay back some of the money that had been stolen. It was pretty difficult, but I really believed in what I was doing. And I think, it certainly wasn't easy, and I didn't have any money for years and years and years, but I knew that there was hundreds and hundreds of people reliant on me. So I think that sort of propelled me through to Fashion Revolution, which again was just that sense that, the Rana Plaza factory collapse has to stand for something. And I almost feel slightly guilty that it's me who founded it, because there's lots of people in London at the time who were having meetings and saying, what are we going to do as a response to this? And I was having a nice warm bath on the Sunday night, and the idea just hit me and seemed like a good enough idea to get out of the bath and do something about it. And I think that's that entrepreneurial spirit and that sense that you can do something against injustice in the world.
That entrepreneurial spirit is something that is sound very familiar to you too, Gina. You've had a crazy 18 months, shall we say, understatement of the year. That kind of sense of, well, I suppose you have been subject to some massive threats, haven't you, over the last 18 months? The reaction to you standing up and saying, hang on a minute, this isn't right, has been really extreme.
I still find it bizarre, because I asked, I thought, perfectly normal, common sense, simple question. It wasn't actually that difficult question to ask. But, so I expected a backlash. I obviously didn't expect what I've got, and I have to say every single part of my life has been ransacked. But what that tells me is that it was the right question to ask. Because I don't want people who threaten me. I mean, sorry, let's turn this around. If they believed with me, I'd be really worried. If they actually liked me, the people who are extreme and who are out there threatening me and my family agreed with me, I'd be really, really concerned. So the fact is, I'm obviously representing a different voice. And it seems so natural to me, because this is what I was supposed to do. It didn't really come as a surprise to me, or any of it that happened. I've always been somebody, I've been at both extremes. I've lived in a car with no money. I've sort of, had nothing to eat for weeks, and whatever it is. I've been at both extremes, and I'm now successful because of my own endeavors. But my principles haven't changed. My use of my voice hasn't changed. And the people who, I've always hated bullies. And it doesn't matter what form they come in. I will never let someone bully me. And I will I will never grant them the right to take my voice away. It's my voice, and I'm allowed to use it in whatever way I see fit. How dare they try to take it away from me? So I will never let that happen. And that's the thing I would like to the thing I talk to a lot of women, a lot of groups about, is that don't let somebody else take your voice away. Whatever it is you're doing in your life. And if they threaten you, then you know your power. Your voice has power. Because then, if it didn't, they wouldn't threaten you.
That's true. It seems a good point to come back to you, Harriet. You went into Parliament in the 80s. What were the biggest hurdles that you encountered during that time?
Well, I think that, it was that model of a woman's life being subordinate to and supportive of a man that we were trying to change, and felt that this was an injustice and an inequality, together with a whole load of other inequalities. And it was that sense that women should be able to have their voice, like Gina was saying. And actually, there is a simplicity about what you were saying. She was saying, surely, actually, the government doesn't have the legal right to make all these decisions in a parliamentary democracy. It actually consults Parliament, and Parliament has a decision on this. And yet the idea that a woman could have this view and not just shut up when a whole load of people don't want you to say that. I think this whole thing about women's voices and the different ways that are made to silence women is a very, very important one. And whether you're doing it in the Supreme Court, as Gina did, or as Mel does it in WOW, or Carrie does it, or whether you're doing it just in a meeting at work where actually you're being talked over, or you say something and then actually one of the men says it, exactly the same thing, and then everybody says, oh, that's a good idea. And this whole thing about women not allowing themselves to be silenced, and it's quite difficult, because if you actually are wanting not to be silenced, are you being aggressive, stroppy, unreasonable, unteamly? Your generation still is a pioneering generation. you're still actually trying to lead lives which are very different from what your mother's generation were trying to achieve in terms of being out there at work, being involved in all sorts of things, having a family as well, looking after older relatives, all the other things. And I think there is still that fight on as to what it is to be a woman in her own rightful place, who's able to speak, listens, able to lead as well as support. I'm trying to groom the idea that actually that amongst men there should be like an ambition to be the deputy and to have an ambition to know how to support a woman leader. How many men have that ambition to be deputy and to be a really cracking good deputy? Lots of women have the idea of being a good deputy and supporting the person at the top. And yet it's a new notion for men that they should aspire to be the deputy. Anyway, that's what I'm working on in the Labour Party right now. I'm saying, you know, I love to see all these ambitious men, and they are, you know, there is some fantastic men, and I say to them, I'm really backing your ambition. Aim high, aim to be deputy. And they're like, you know.
I'd love to be a fly on the wall in that meeting. I mean, Gina, you had, when you challenged Brexit, people thought there must be a man behind you, didn't they?
There are three things that shocked me more than anything. One is that I was not clever enough to have thought about this, or I couldn't possibly, so it must be lots of men pulling my strings, you know, I'm a puppet, they're my puppet masters. The second, that even though my wonderful husband's here, I couldn't have my own money in my own right and my own success. It must be that I'm using his or somebody else's money. And the third thing, which I found probably the most shocking of all, is that as a woman of colour, it was not my place to speak up. No. That I found the most shocking, is that I'm supposed to be, as an immigrant, I'm supposed to know my place.
Yeah, be grateful.
And be grateful and not speak up. And I find that absolutely shocking. And can I say, this is not just in Twitter, this whole sort of myth that it's all keyboard warriors and whatever. It's not. It's people who write me on beautiful, expensive, laid paper, get a first-class stamp, walk down to a post office, post it, with the most poisonous words. It's been in the press recently, you know, a fourth-generation Viscount who took out the £5,000 bounty on my head because I'm not even human, I'm a primate. Women, this has gone to another level. And I think being a woman, you know, somebody in the press, a right-wing press, said to me the other day, Gina, you made it really easy for us because if we could have designed a perfect person to take a target at for being the leaders of the Brexiteers because they never bothered to read the legal case, it would have been you. So you were fair game, is what that was the term. I was fair game. None of this is acceptable. And the thing I've discovered, meeting with MPs, women who are news readers in different media, something I'm working on now, is this idea when I've been told time and time again, it's normal. And I'm saying, stop saying it's normal. Stop normalizing this. It is not normal that because you're a woman, you put your head above the parapet and you have a voice, you are a target for abuse. We have to all collectively say, it's not normal. So that's something I'd say we all can start doing in the boardroom, in the meeting room, when you're talked over. I am here to have a voice. Stop telling me that my voice needs to go and abuse me. It's not normal.
Mel, is your experience that people are more resistant to change when it's being pushed through by a woman?
Yes, most definitely. Most definitely. You know, having it doesn't matter. I had, 20 years financial services experience with all of the banks of the world and the big ones anyway, flying around the world, having, master's degrees coming out of my U-Haul. Certified IQ, like numbers genius since I was a child, and it still wasn't good enough. Still go right back to being an angry black woman. I got braces so that I smile all the time in your face, and I will still be that angry black woman. And I was speaking about culture for growth. It was a panel with Ed Vasey, the then kind of arts kind of minister, and we were speaking about making sure that the arts are invested in, so that it's just because arts are good. There's well, for me, their arts are good. I'm an advocate for the arts, and I got just the worst amount of trolling, and it went right back down to my gender and race. I could be speaking about triple lock versus double lock pensions on the BBC, and it still went back to my race. And it was difficult, and you're right, people say that, you know what, you do get used to it. But I think that the amount of credibility that I had to externally seek to make sure that people were listening to the authority that I had in my voice because of the experience and the education. And on top of that, I have big hair today, but it's only because I literally just got off the plane from Harlem. And, Harlem being an African-American Mecca, there's no way I could go in with kind of straightened, relaxed hair. I wouldn't have done my sisters any good. And I came here, and I usually would straighten my hair for this. If I'm in the BBC studios next door, I would not even wear this big hair. I would make sure that it was conformed, because people are distracted by the color of your skin and your appearance. And that means also being a woman and a black woman. And it's been extremely difficult. And I would say that as my advice to any woman that's putting their head above the parapet, don't discount the hurt. Take the care, the self-care when you are putting yourself above the parapet and people are throwing arrows at you. You get hurt, and before you get the calluses, it stings. And so make sure you have your squad around you and your pod who will come back and tell you, don't worry about it, Mel, it's okay. And make sure you're just, that you're taking care of yourself in that way, because it does come as soon as you go into that leadership game changer mode, and it hurts. And so don't barrel on through and say, yeah, it's, I'm okay, dust it off my shoulders. Actually, no, feel it and absorb it and let it kind of live through you for a little bit, because then that's when you can develop the real callus to be able to say, okay, I can keep on moving. Because a lot of the time, particularly with women, gosh, we're like, yeah, you can do everything at the same time. No, you can't. No, you can't. We're not super women, actually. We're human beings, and we have feelings, and we're frail in some areas. So I would say always for a younger woman coming after me, I always say, hey, if that hurt, it's okay to say that it hurt. It's cool. And just keep it moving. You'll instead of it coming out in some kind of aggressively angry kind of or self-harming way,
It's okay to cry. It's okay to cry.
Yeah.
Do you find it difficult though sometimes to work out when it's right to say, sorry, this is not acceptable, or when you think, I'm going to just have to let this one go because I'm having too many rows all around?
Oh
because
my gosh, yes.
That's something that I've found, trying to strike that balance between, keeping things moving forward, but not letting things which are not acceptable go. And I can look back and see a number of occasions where I definitely shouldn't have let something go, and where I've thought, focus on the bigger picture, don't raise it. But actually, when you let things go, actually they are symbolic and quite important. I'll just give one example, which is quite topical at the moment, is that we were having the G20 meeting when we were in government in Downing Street, and it was 2008, and my office got, and we were in government, I was in the cabinet, I was deputy leader, my office got an invite for the G20 dinner. There's always a big dinner at the end of these G20 meetings. And, Obama was there, and Barroso was there, and Angela Merkel was there, and everybody was there. And so they said, oh, you've been invited to the dinner. And I said, oh, that's great, just put it in the diary. And they said, well, we're not sure that it is great. So I said, well, why? And they said, because you've been invited to the wives' dinner. And it was like, no way. Oh, it's like, I didn't want to be snubbing the wives, because it's like, I'm better than you, because I'm not here as a wife. I'm here as an elected person and a member of the cabinet. So therefore, I'm not going to have dinner with you because I'm above you. That would be like unsisterly. But like, I was not a wife. I was not married to anybody that was at this other. And so we had this doctrinal seminar in my office as to what was the feministly appropriate thing to do. So actually, I went to the wives' dinner, and I think probably, and the photograph, because you know they always take photographs of these events, was ridiculous because everybody else was there for somebody's wife except for me. And it was like, this is absolutely ridiculous. And actually, I should have found a way to tackle that. And another example was when the first cabinet meeting after I got elected as deputy leader, Gordon Brown had taken over as Prime Minister, and because it was a new cabinet, round the cabinet table they'd put name tags of where everybody should sit. And I'd been in the cabinet before, so I knew that the deputy sits next to the Prime Minister, opposite the Chancellor of the Exchequer, and then on that side of the Chancellor of the Exchequer is the Home Secretary, and on this side the Foreign Secretary. So all this positioning is very important. So I went in thinking, well, that's Gordon Brown's seat, so I'll be sitting next to him. And I looked at the name tag, and it didn't have my name on it. It had Jack Straw's name on it. And I was like, you know, you don't want to be like Goldilocks, somebody sitting in my chair. So I thought, where am I sitting at this meeting? And realised I was nearly out in the garden. I was virtually out on the terrace. And I didn't feel I could say before we start talking about the economy, can we just talk about where I'm sitting? You know, you always feel in a way when you're raising something like that, are you being trivial? Are you being self-serving? But actually the message that's sent about that sort of thing is really, really important. So I think in a way, the thing to do is to work out a plan of how you sort that sort of thing out, but not to let it go. Every time you let it go, if it's wrong, you've kind of disadvantaged yourself and other women, and it's not right. So the point is not to let it go, but to have a plan of how to sort it out.
That's a really interesting one, because I would have actually picked it up and just moved it myself and not told anybody. But yeah, but the idea of I have come across this idea of a lot of women saying, well, you know, we don't want to be seen as the bitch, or we need to be liked, and likability, I think, is an issue, because it does two things. It
Not
limits
teamly.
us.
Not
Not
teamly.
teamly. That whole sort of thing, you know, all those. I think it limits us because we don't go out of our comfort zone. We want to be liked. And I say to a lot of women, and this is just the way I practice, so I can just say it from my point of view, is when I'm at work, I'm at work. I don't care if you like me or not. I'm there to do a job and to get things done. I can be liked at home by my family and friends. I really don't need to be liked in work. But the second thing is, it sends the wrong messages to not just men, but to women in the organization about what it is to be a woman in an organization, is that you have to know your place. So I think being bold and stepping up, and when you know something is wrong, or you know your voice, you need to speak up about it, it actually sets other women free, and it sets you free. And it just ways of working out how to do it. One of the things I worked at quite a long time ago, and I realized a very long time ago, bearing in mind I've been in business since the 90s, is that you just let the men speak. So listening is a great tool, because quite often they paint themselves into corners that then you can come in at. So, you know, the art of listening gives you the power to then engage and triumph. So it's just one of those very small things that I learned a long time ago, because quite often we want to be heard straight away. Step back, let them just listen. Let the peacocks perform, and then go in and be the resolution to whatever issues going on in the room.
Kerry, that must sound quite familiar to you. There are a lot of peacocks in the fashion industry, aren't there?
There are, but it's also an incredibly female-dominated industry, and I do feel very fortunate listening to these stories, you know, to be working in the industry where there are so many women. I mean, unfortunately, you know, this is part of the reason for the problems in the fashion industry, because it's not just the designers and the support industry where there's a lot of women. It's also 80% of the garment workers are women, and these are the women whose stories we want to get out there, because these are the women who are being abused. We're part of the biggest ever research project in Cambodia, India and Bangladesh, interviewing 540 women on a daily basis about how much money they're earning, what they're spending, but also on any illnesses, on any loans they've taken out, and any sort of abuse, harassment at work. And it's really, really shocking how many women in the survey have been abused. How many of them, I think it was 40%, 44%, had seen a fire in their place of work. So these are women who are not just suffering, abuse, we're still working in dangerous sort of working conditions. This is after the Rana Plaza disaster, when things are supposed to have got better. So, I think, my role is certainly to stand up and to help to be a voice for all of those women who don't have a voice in the industry, and that's what Fashion Revolution wants to do, is to say, we want to work with the unions as well, and the people who are working to try and give a voice to those women, because so many of the people, when you hear their stories, it's so tragic, and we can do something about it. We can all do something about it through our purchasing power.
You've been quite well supported at a grassroots level, but how has your campaign been received at the top from the powers that be in the fashion industry?
We're getting there. I think certainly this year we're seeing a lot more engagement. We saw Vogue writing a couple of articles. We saw the Daily Telegraph writing something every day of the week throughout Fashion Revolution Week. So we're certainly seeing the mainstream press realising that actually, we're not something scary, that they can engage with Fashion Revolution, because we're about fashion, we love fashion. We're not campaigning out in the streets, sort of going into the stores and causing a disruption campaign. We're in a campaign saying, we love fashion, but it can be done in a more beautiful and a cleaner and a better way. So I think we've seen a lot more people getting on board this year, and that includes the brands as well. Really exciting to see brands who are in our Fashion Transparency Index, the top 100 brands in the world, actually showing us photographs of their producers and starting to give us real information about them. So I think it's taken time, but I think because of the very creative and fashion way, which the movement's been created, and thanks to Heather, who's in the audience, who's our head of communications, who's responsible for a lot of our amazing branding, it's given us a lot of credibility across the industry.
I've got about a bazillion more questions here, but I'm going to ask one more, and then we'll go to the audience to take questions from them. It's the election in 4 weeks. Is it 4?
4 weeks today.
4 weeks today. Yeah, Harriet's counting down over there. So one election question. If there was one thing about British politics you could change, what would it be? Carrie, I'll start with you. She's got a big list, look.
Sure. I mean, what I'd really like to see is for the UK to adopt legislation like France has just adopted in terms of due diligence within supply chains. So I'd really like to see the UK government adopt similar due diligence. The European Parliament has just voted on a recommendation for due diligence throughout supply chains in the garment and textile industry a couple of weeks ago as well. But if we're when we leave the EU, then obviously that won't apply to us. So I'd really like to see greater due diligence and legislation, so to make sure that brands do have to comply, so we actually see a race to the top rather than the continued race to the bottom in the fashion industry.
Not holding your breath.
No, I don't know, it's getting there.
That's really tough. You're asking a political philosopher what you change about democracy.
Yeah,
so I'm trying to keep it short.
We haven't got that much time.
No, I'm going to keep it short.
Gina's got to be out of here at 8.
For me, fundamentally, I think the system is broken in regards to representation of people. You'll see that in regards to the referendums, and referendums really being issue laden, so it's not necessarily about the one issue and the one vote. It is literally attached to all of these other things in regards to inequality of the system. So quite frankly, I don't actually agree with how democracy is playing out across the Western democracies. It's not that I'm saying that I'm a communist, but I'm certainly more of a philosophical anarchist right now, because it's broken. Your voice after voice after voice from all stratospheres are saying we are not represented, we are not being heard, and we can't just say, oh, well, the MPs aren't doing their job. It's literally just broken. So there's a lot of change, but I don't know. And now we're seeing it. I think with communism, we kind of stamped it out. That's what we were trying to do, stamp it out a few years ago. And now we're saying, ooh, this is what we meant by democracy. These are the problems that happen when we are giving power to the people, but we're not really giving them power anymore. Now they're going to vote with, kind of with 1,000 issues in one referendum. So that's me. See, I did it short. That was short, though. Come on, guys.
Yeah, it was very short. Gina, what do you think?
I have a slightly different view. I think that referenda and plebiscite in our democracy would be very dangerous because people don't have the time we're so busy, we don't actually have the time to research and understand the things we would be asked to vote on. And that's one of the problems with the referendum that happened. So I do believe in our representative democracy, a democratic system. However, I think the wrong people are in place. So it's about changing the culture within the organization. I think we need to womanize politics, would be a good start. In terms of the referenda, I think it's also about different voices in different places. And this whole idea that everyone should agree and Westminster should become an echo chamber is very, very dangerous. And we should all of us, we all have an opportunity on the 8th of June to make our voice heard. And as women, there are women who died to give us the vote. And the most responsible thing every single person in this room can do is to exercise their vote on the 8th of June. Because as I said, we have power and we can hold the system to account, but we let them win when we don't turn up and we don't exercise that power.
Were you tempted to stand?
There was some very naughty person who actually put my name down in Maidenhead. It was because I had, over the bank holiday weekend, I had numerous calls saying, you're standing in Maidenhead. And I went, no, I'm not. And then they sent me a screenshot, which was some mischief maker was doing this. I wouldn't for two reasons. One is, I think if you're going to be a candidate and you're going to be a minister, you should give 110% to your constituencies, or your constituents, and I'm not in that place. I have my other campaigns, I have my business. I just couldn't do that right now. Also, I could do more outside than inside because I refuse to be whipped in any way, shape, or form.
As a whipped?
Well, I'd agree with Gina about the importance of voting. It is incredible that between 8 and 9 million women in this country didn't vote at the last general election, and especially amongst young people. So I think that is incredibly important. I've always felt very strongly that things work better if there is equality and if there isn't discrimination and there isn't prejudice. I mean, it makes perfect sense that things are better in a home if it's not, the man who's the head of the household and his word goes and everybody else is subordinate. It's better in a family if people are on an equal footing and they're all recognised for their individual talents. In communities, it's better if one group is not persecuting another group and everybody's working and living together happily. And in the economy, it obviously works better like that because you've got the pool of all the talents and it's a meritocracy rather than some people being shut out of the economy. So I think equality and tackling discrimination, whether it's in relation to gender or ethnicity or age or disability or sexual orientation, I think it's wrong in principle but profoundly dysfunctional at every aspect. And therefore the big change I would like to see is I'd like to see a change of government on June the 8th, but that's just me. And we are in an election campaign right now.
Yeah. And there ends the party political forecast.
It is quite perplexing because I meet especially some of the younger conservative women MPs who are like daughters of the women's movement. They're concerned about childcare, they're wanting to tackle domestic violence, they don't think women should be seen and not heard, they've done things with their lives, and I'm like very perplexed, and I'm like, you're in the wrong party.
On that note, should we take some questions from the floor? Presumably there are some. If not, I've got about 150 here, so if you lot haven't.
No.
Really? Not one? Oh, not you, bloody Nimco, honestly.
Sorry.
Go on, take
Okay.
the mic away from her again in a minute, though.
Yeah, no, sorry. Hi, Gina. I've got a complete girl crush on you, and that's just kind of happened. But I just wanted to say I kind of really related to the things that you said about getting the throwback and a lot of the hate for speaking out about something that you're really passionate about. And one of the things is, like, having seen the hate and the reactions that you've got, would you have done something different, or would you have done what you did differently? Because that's something that I really just want to know in terms of reacting to that.
When I was about to bring the case, it wasn't just me in the beginning. There were two other very successful, very wonderful men, white men, and I absolutely understand why they didn't proceed, and I decided to do it on my own. Because when you are only worried about your voice and not other people's, it gives you a freedom. And I've worked for my money, my business is my business. That gives me a certain amount of freedom. I can look after myself, but if I'm suddenly in charge of a huge corporation and I've got lots of shareholders and there's a huge board and huge responsibility, and also everybody knows my brand and everybody knows where I live and they know my family, I absolutely understand why they didn't stand up. But at the same time, it was always going to be me. I mean, there was just something quite fatalistic. I've always been somebody who stood up for my principles. So when the choice was, if you don't do this, nobody else was, I went, well, of course it was going to be me, and of course I'm going to do it. I have to say, I never envisaged what came from the press. I expected it on social media and all the rest of it to some degree, to a most degree. I didn't expect that the press would have been allowed, after Leveson, to behave in the way in which they behaved. I thought there was a code, the IPSA code. I thought there were things in place that would mean that people would not be allowed, under an article which said foreign born, whatever it is, that they would not be allowed to have hundreds and hundreds of comments underneath which said, this woman deserves to be raped, killed, whatever. I thought that that was moderated. I completely misunderstood. And one of the arguments I have with the press and with the whole media is this obsession of, oh, it's social media, therefore it's not regulated. I have to say, I think the IPSO code is not fit for purpose. We can't do this on Facebook. Can we keep things very simple? It's not about the medium, it's about the message. Inciting racial and sexual violence is against the law. It does not matter which medium it comes in. It is against the law. And if we could go back to keeping things very simple, then these media have to be more responsible. And that is the thing I find most shocking, is that the media is not being regulated more.
And the sad thing is that it's done often in the name of free speech.
Oh, yes.
And that is the paradox, because we all instinctively support and want to back free speech. But when free speech is silencing people, then we have to fight against it. And again, that's quite a difficult balance to be struck, isn't it? Except in your case, it was perfectly obvious. You know.
Any more questions? This one here. Is there a mic? Yeah.
Hello, this is a question to any of you. If you were a young woman now coming up in this political climate, what advice would you want to hear?
Mel, I'm picking on you. I think you were talking about this back then, in the green room.
In this political climate, no, it's not mine. No, in this political climate, advice for young women in this political climate, it wouldn't change. I think it's the political climate thing that's kind of messing me up. I think it wouldn't change whether we were here or 10 years ago or 10 years later. It's have your go and find your voice, use it, know what you are bringing to the world and value it so that you can exchange your product or service for, the capital, because you're exchanging your life force. That's not gonna, and that doesn't change whether it's the political climate of today or tomorrow or yesteryear. I would say that we did go through a whole superwoman phase, that we're doing everything. And so then now we're tempering a little bit and saying, well, you can do everything, but just not at the same time, sweetness. hold it down a little bit, focus on one thing and become excellent on the craft instead of doing this whole multitasking thing, because multitasking now we know is proven, and in terms of adult minds it does not work. So I would actually kind of mature that message a bit more and say, hey, choose your thing, focus on it for a little bit, and you know what, have grace on yourself. If it doesn't work out, then you just go to the next thing, because that's what we do. All of the endeavors, I'm sure that we've all gone through. Our first endeavors probably didn't work out very well. People always like to focus on the end point. With Steve Jobs or Jeff Bezos, all these big guys with Amazon and Apple, and then you look at Steve Jobs got kicked out of his own company. No one can kick me out of my own company. I don't know how that happened, but can you imagine being kicked out of your own company and to what that company is today? And so I would also encourage you to just be graceful with yourself and with others in terms of making mistakes. This may not be perfect the first time, and there is an apprenticeship that we all go through, whether we are Steve Jobs or Jesus the carpenter. So let's think about that.
Carrie, what would you say to young you now?
Gosh, I think likewise, it's knowing what you're passionate about. It's taking the time, opening yourself up to different experiences. We were talking earlier on in the green room about, interning. We've got an amazing intern at the moment, and I do feel like, there's so many opportunities to pass on that knowledge. People who are really passionate about change in the world. So it's taking the time. It's finding the people, who are your heroes and asking if you can shadow them, asking if you can be mentored by them. Because I think, so many of us have got a lot that we can pass on, and there's lots of young people who are really hungry for, just those tools, those things that we've learned over decades and decades and decades that we can pass on and actually try and make the life a little bit easier for the younger generation who is coming up, so they don't have to fight all the same battles that we have.
Harriet, what do you think for the young women you see coming into Parliament now?
That just to bear in mind that there are, it's very difficult to get it right, but there's hundreds of different ways to get it wrong, and not to judge yourself too harshly when you do get things wrong, because we are all still, and you all are from your generation as well, trying to work out what it is to be a woman in this society and how the different bits of your life fit together. And therefore, you're trying to shape the future. You can't necessarily look and do it in the way that other people have done it, because then you'd be making no progress. So if you are breaking down new barriers, then sometimes you'll feel you're making a mistake. It might be that you're not making a mistake, it's just tough. And also recognise that probably if you're not having a row with anybody, you're probably not making any change. So don't worry too much. Perhaps worry more if you're massively popular with everybody, then you're not actually pushing the boundaries.
The thing is, I've had to, if I had gone in being wrathful, and I wouldn't have gotten anything. I wouldn't have gotten anything done. I remember Mom giving me advice when I started the awards. She's like, you know what, Mel, do not go out and send a pigeon with a broken wing. Your message will never get there. And even though you're really angry about the fact that you don't have equal opportunity, that Black people do not have equal opportunity in, Australia. I was in these last 6 months, I've been to Australia, South Africa, New York, Canada, here, and I still get the question, why do you guys need a Black Awards? And it's like, dude, why can't you make it BAME? Like, BAME? It's not BAME in Australia or South Africa, and it gets me so angry. However, I can't display that anger. I can't actually get riled up. I have to physically let it dispense, because I know that as soon you get more with sweet than you get with salt, as my mother would say. She's also Trinidadian, so those are the kind of things they say. But you would get, and so there is a tempering that I've had to, that I have to learn in regards to, knowing the game, so saying we're in the game changers kind of panel, and knowing the game and saying, okay, what's the best way to change the game? And me getting angry was not the best way for me to change the game. It wouldn't, I would have been locked out of every door. And so I had to literally smile my way into the door and take some of the indignities that Martin Luther King spoke of. He's like, the indignities that leaders have to take on behalf of the people that they are leading or on behalf of the cause that they are furthering is really great. And so I think that on one hand, yes, I encourage you to be, kind of passionate. And of course, there is anger there in regards to injustice and inequality. But then there is also grace that, again, you have to afford not just yourself, but others. And where do you really want to get to in your cause? And you're not going to get there you're not going to get as far sometimes just saying it with anger. You are going to get there by working with people. Me being angry at men, that's not going to help anyone. The men, men need they need gender kind of discussion as much as we do, if not more. Like 40%, is it under the age of 40, the biggest killer of men is suicide? And we can't ignore those things, and so we want to get riled up and passionate, but then there's also a tempering with knowledge and information and pretty much being strategic and saying, okay, I want to win this game, so how am I going to sit back and win, and I'm going to smile and get the issue that I want rather than being like So that's something I would also kind of
I think we're going to give Gina the last word.
I was going to say I have a different view, which is I have sons, brothers, husbands, so I believe in equality, but how can women I actually think we concentrate a bit too much on our heads. We have to remember our heart as well. And it's not just trying to be powerful and engage women to be powerful or anybody in society. It's about caring and taking the time out to care. Taking the time out to find out if there's some woman or man in your organization, young man or woman, who might be feeling alienated or disempowered, or walking home from work when you're going to your nice house and seeing somebody crying on a bench and not knowing, are they contemplating suicide? Are they thinking they're the only person in the world? They feel depressed. Taking time out to use our heart, not just our head, because they are the two most powerful muscles we own as human beings. And we need to exercise them both. And if we just concentrate on our brains and our progressions and this modern view of success, we forget the people going all the way around to Brexit, the people who voted leave, a large percentage who cried out because nobody cared or heard them. We can't take that for granted. We can't take the lives we have for granted and the privilege we have in our lives for granted. We need to remember to use our heart. If we can do that, especially as women, I think we can start start healing some of the wounds, I think, of where we are now. Because my biggest fear as we go forwards is that we are going to get more and more division. We are striving, and we're talking about equality. I think the exact opposite is happening. We are creating division because we are choosing our media, we're choosing our messages, we're choosing to be ghettoizing our minds and our hearts. We have to stop it. And as women, we can be the land girls. After the last war, we can be the ones who go out there and we create, recreate, recycle British values, and we can build Britain again. And that's what all of us have to do.
How would we disagree?
Yeah.
How would we disagree? Wait. How would we disagree?
Our amazing panel tonight. Thank you.